Stand by. In 3, 2, 1.
Reality. Are you living it?
You are a function of this total galaxy, bounded by the Milky Way, and that furthermore, this galaxy is a function of all other galaxies.
Our reality.
The show that will stretch your consciousness and awaken you to a world of unlimited possibilities. It's time to change the world. It's time for an awakening. It's time for Our Reality. Hosted by your emissary to planet Earth, Violeta.
Hello everyone and welcome to Our Reality. Today's show is going to be a very, very special show and near and dear to my heart. We have with us the world famous Mr. David Icke. Now, David was a BBC television sports presenter and spokesman for the Green Party in 1990 when psychic told him that he had been placed on Earth for a purpose and would begin to receive messages from the spirit world. He started following the calling and started receiving messages and uncovering actually how our world works and a lot about dimensions and parallel worlds and things that are very unfamiliar to the average or to the masses. And throughout the whole journey encountered at first a lot of resistance, but he was strong and kept going. Me personally, I started listening to him about, I would say, good 15 years ago, and really have nothing but admiration for David. So after that, over the next 11 years, David Icke wrote Robots' Rebellion and The Truth Shall Set You Free, The Biggest Secret, Children of the Matrix, his latest book, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. And recently, his life story has been put in a movie called Renegade, the life story of David Icke. With this, I want to welcome you, David. Hello.
Hello, Violeta. How are you?
I am very nervous to talk to you.
Well, why?
Because you are my hero. You have
No.
Yes, I know, right? You are my hero. Hero. Well, to me, you're like the Galileo Galilei of our time, because you're the first one that I heard talking about interdimensionals, and now quantum physics is actually explaining all this. And before that, it was unfeasible that dimensions could exist and that they could actually feed on us and manipulate us. And you put that all in the foreground. And I know it was a long path. How did you take all the criticism and still be able to go on?
Well, I think for a number of reasons. First of all, I can be very stubborn when I think something needs to be done and people are trying to stop me. I don't back off. And I went through an enormous period of ridicule in Britain. I mean, historic levels of ridicule in the early 1990s. And that gave me a wonderful gift. It set me free of the concern about what other people thought of me. Because when you go through the levels of ridicule that I did, then you either end up running away and hiding, or you come out home through the fire in steel. And I chose the latter. And also I'm absolutely fascinated by uncovering more and more and more knowledge, and so that drives me on. And then there's really the third part of it, which is once you realize that we are not our labels, whatever labels we give ourselves, whatever labels people tell us to identify with, but we are the consciousness having the experiences we call the labels, then really I am, like you, like everyone, I am consciousness, a state of awareness, part of an infinite state of awareness in which we're all, if you like, points of attention. And thus this very short, brief experience within a band of frequency we call the world takes on a completely different light. Suddenly, when you have the understanding that we are exploring forever, then what people say about us or do about us, or what abuse or ridicule they throw at us in this one tiny expression of reality, within an infinite reality, in this biblical 70 years and 10, is really irrelevant. You are. It's an experience, and if people want to do this or do that, well, that's just an experience. But once you have this self-identity that I am awareness, infinite awareness, having an experience, then the experience itself no longer overwhelms you, whether that experience is ridicule or abuse or whatever. It doesn't overwhelm you. It doesn't concern you. Because and also the longer it goes on, and the more what you've said previously is shown to be true, then you get more and more confident that you're on the right track, and therefore even less will affect you. And so this has been the combination of things that's taken me from literally being laughed at in the street wherever I go to people stopping me in the street now wanting to talk seriously about what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I've seen your interviews, I mean, throughout your career, and incredibly courageous, incredibly, it just, for me, as an outside onlooker, I said to myself, this man has a very important message that he is needs to get out at all costs. And he is not, the least, of course, you're a human being, you have feelings, but you kept on going. And these concepts that I find also to be truth about, you believe the universe is made up of vibrational energy and consists of an infinite number of dimensions that share the same space. Yep. And believing that this interdimensional race of reptilian beings called the Archons or Anunnaki have hijacked the Earth, and genetically modified human Archon hybrid race of shapeshifting is actually the elite and manipulating global events. At first seemed to a lot of people who are just worried about going to work and being, like you said, the little old me, seemed something very, very far-fetched. But to me, it was almost like a universal movie playing out. And I was rooting for you that, oh my gosh, let people wake up and let this man bring his message about, because it's so important, because while we're still learning, they already know. And they're really progressing into this totalitarian global system that we're almost not noticing. And when I say we, I say, the majority of human population today on Earth. I've seen, and I haven't seen your movie yet, but I will. But I've seen snippets on it on YouTube, and you do mention over and over again, hey, wake up, this totalitarian state, it's about to happen through AI, through technology. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, what you've just described, reptilian entities changing shape. I mean, it's hardly surprising that people find that fantastic, that people find that crazy. I mean, why wouldn't they? Because your perceptions of reality come from information received. That's how we form them. And if you live a, quote, normal human life, from cradle to grave, you are bombarded with a particular, very narrow sense of reality, sense of the world, sense of possibility. And that's all you basically hear. And if that's all you hear, then that information is transferred to your perceptions, and that's all you believe. So someone comes along, you can see throughout history, this has happened. Look at all the people through history that have said things that have been way ahead of what's perceived as their time. but have later been shown to be true. But at the time, they were ridiculed and dismissed, called crazy, locked up, burned at the stake. It's because, whatever the information source that dominates a particular period will form the perceptions of most of the population in that period, whether it's religion, whether it's mainstream science or whatever. So, it was kind of funny. Some people said to me, didn't you know that you'd get a lot of ridicule when you came out with that? And I said, do you know, I actually did. Funnily enough, I'd worked that out. But I said it anyway because the point had come from traveling around the world, speaking to endless people, both insiders within the system today and within the military intelligence complex, and with the shamans and carriers of the ancient knowledge in ancient societies. And they were speaking the same language. They were telling me the same things from a different perspective, but it was the same things. It was the same story about this non-human force that was manipulating human society. And so eventually there came a point where I had so much information from so many different not connected sources, in fact, very different sources, that it crossed the line, my line, where I thought, this is real. And I went for it. And of course, initially you get enormous ridicule. But, again, if you fall into the prison of having yourself censored and you're self-limited by what other people think, then all you're going to ever be in your life is an expression of someone else's perception of reality. We're not going to move on in terms of our understanding because we're going to censor ourselves to stay within what is acceptable. And what is acceptable? It's whatever reality people have accepted from the download of information that the system has given them. So all renegades, which is the name of this movie, all renegades, mavericks, whatever word you like to use, are those that say, I'm going to look outside of this bubble and see if there's anything else to know. And of course, there is, because the bubble's so tiny anyway. And I'm going to explore it. And when I find things, I'm going to talk about them. And if people don't like it, well, they can do the other thing, because it don't matter to me, because I'm still going to talk about them. And what happens is that if what you say has validity, then eventually events will unfold, things will happen to show that they have validity. But if you don't speak about them and write about them at the time when you know that people are just going to laugh and dismiss, then that point where they're seen to be valid never comes, because you didn't say them in the first place. So it's been very important to speak your truth when it appears that there are consequences for that, because otherwise the truth never circulates. And in terms of reality and interdimensional stuff, it occurred to me from way back that the idea that this world that we perceive is the only reality is insane. So my mind was open to other possibilities from the start. I never bought the idea that the world that we perceive is the only reality that exists. I mean, it's ridiculous, especially when you break it down. And because people and it's changing, more and more people are now beginning to look at the world in a different way. It's very encouraging. It's fantastic. But those who don't are basically thinking that all there is to know is basically what you can see, touch, taste, and hear, etc. It's not. That's a tiny, tiny fraction of reality. And when you break it down and you put it in its context, it becomes ridiculous to think that you say human life is all there is, for instance. The planet Earth, according to the projections of mainstream science at the moment, compared with the size of the universe, is the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead. I do feel that when you're on a planet the size, the billionth of a pinhead, compared with one universe, never mind all the others, and all the other expressions of reality that don't take the form of what we call universes, I think there's a fair chance there's other life out there other than human, And then you look at the fact that when we look through our eyes, we're seeing a tiny, tiny smear of what exists, something called visible light, which is almost infinitesimal in the range of, if you like, space that we can see, compared with the forever that exists beyond it. It's like turning on one of those television channels on American TV, which go on forever. There's just seems to be endless numbers of channels. It's like turning on one of those channels and believing that channel is the only channel that exists. All the other channels exist at the same time, but you're not tuned to them. Therefore, you can only perceive one. But flick the channel changer, and now you're on another one. And in the same way, this body, if you like, what I call a biological computer, focuses our attention, focuses our awareness attention on a very narrow band of frequency, which is what that body operates within, and therefore can decode, like a computer, into reality. Anything beyond that, we cannot perceive. Just as when you're watching NBC, you can't perceive CNN, which is a good thing, I would say, and you can't perceive Fox News, you can't perceive MSNBC, but they still exist. And this is the, if you like, the hoax that humanity gets pulled into. Because what really got me into all this is the whole panorama of the conspiracy was when I realized that, hey, there are these other explanations for reality that make far more sense than, what mainstream science and the media tells you. Why isn't this being taught in the schools? Why aren't we seeing television programs about it as a matter of course? And that's when I thought, well, so why don't we? And when you ask that, that's when you step into the conspiracy, which then the panorama opens over a vast number of subjects. But that's where it started for me. Why are these other explanations of reality never talked about, never shown, never discussed, or very rarely, except on basically minor channels? And it's because if we knew the true nature of reality and the true nature of the I, then this world would be a very different place.
Absolutely. And what you're saying has actually been backed by some of the greatest minds in the world. I know Nikola Tesla, he comes from my country, and I've read a lot of stuff. And he always talked about vibration as well, which totally backs what you're saying, and parallel worlds. And he called this reality we live in a realm, right? Not necessarily a planet, but a realm. Why I was very privileged to understand and take in the information you were sharing is because, I was born as a starseed, a communications from young on at six and on that, we have been sent here by a galactic force, and we had to do jobs from the inside out rather than from outside in, and that planet Earth is currently under siege. And then later on in life, I also, me and my brother both, we actually saw shapeshifters when we were kids at 15 in real life, and went, whoa, what is this? Are we crazy? What's going on here? So later on in life, as I read your information, it was finally like as if somebody in the world knew what I experienced. Somebody in the world knew and was talking about it. And of course, there's starseeds all around the world now. Like you said, the global awakening is happening. People are tuning into their power. But, there is still this lingering tyrannical force that is actually running all the systems, the law, the businesses, and just the matrix, right? And how do we break free from that? How in the world?
Well, First of all, for anyone that's kind of new to this, shape-shifting sounds ridiculous. It can't be possible. And why do they say that? They say that because they perceive that the world is solid, and this desk is solid, and everything is solid. And if everything is solid, shape-shifting is impossible. So this is the immediate response you get from people is that's ridiculous, that's impossible. But it's only impossible, not because it's impossible, but it's impossible to perceive if you have a certain view of what reality is. And this is a crucial part of this cradle-to-grave perceptual programming, that how we experience the world as solidity is how the world really is. Now, of course, quantum physics has been unraveling that for a while now and showing that it's not solid at all. And if you think, let me put it this way, if people imagine an infinite stream of consciousness, an infinite stream of energy, and this energy is information, and it operates on multiple frequencies, multiple vibrations. And how much of that field, that infinite field of awareness that you can perceive, is dictated by the observer. The observer dictates how much of that field they can perceive. So if you are someone who has believed that they are their labels, they are their name, they are their sex, they are their race, they are their religion, they are their culture, not that that's an experience they're having, but it's them, it's who they are. If you perceive yourself in terms of little me, I have no power, I'm just a cosmic accident, then that perception of self will express itself as a narrow band of frequency that you are operating on. And within that band of frequency, that's all you can perceive. So you will have a very limited view of possibility. Once you reassess and redefine yourself from I am my experience, that's who I am, to I am the awareness having that experience, and ultimately I am all awareness, then that self-identity, that expanded sense of self-identity also expands the frequency band, the scale, and the frequency levels that you're operating on. So now you are able to perceive and become inspired by and intuitively know from a much wider band of this infinite field of consciousness. And it doesn't mean you're a better person than the one that thinks they're little me. It's just that your different self-identity is allowing you to access a very different scale of infinite awareness. And from that comes the fact that you can see things, understand things, and perceive things that little me can't.
Very interesting. So we're in charge. Thank you, David. We're going to be taking a short break, more with David Icke, as well as your questions and comments in just a bit. This is Violeta Vrankovic, and you're listening to Our Reality. We'll be right back.
And now, your emissary to planet Earth, the host of Our Reality, Violeta Vrankovic.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Our Reality. I'm Violeta Vrankovic, and we are talking with David Icke today. Feel free to join the conversation anytime by connecting with me on chat, Twitter, or even calling into the show at 702-425-9230. Today is a unique opportunity to ask David all the questions you may have. Now, before the break, what we were talking about is how the archons or the elite is controlling our perception, and thereby they're holding us in a vibrational field. David, do you mind? I cut you off, so do you mind explaining a little bit more about that, please?
So what I was saying before the break is that our point of observation and the scale of that point of observation, i.e. Expanded awareness or or much more focused this world awareness dictates how much of this energetic field of consciousness, information, the quantum field of possibility and probability that we actually are accessing and being inspired by. And of course, the more expanded that becomes, the more that you see, the more that you are aware of, the more that what appeared at one point to be dots become pictures. You see how the dots connect. And this is something that's happened to me over 30 years. And so if you are a manipulative force, shall we say, which in part takes a reptilian form, but there are others, that wants to control human society via a network of secret societies that I expose in the books, then you don't want your target population in an expanded state of awareness. You don't want that. It's your worst nightmare. You want to keep them focused on a very narrow band, what I call five sense reality. That's where you want them. Because if you only perceive five sense reality, then the arbiter of everything, whether it's true or not true, possible or impossible, becomes, can I see it, touch it, hear it, taste it, etc. And if you look at human society and the way it's been structured, the way mainstream science is structured, the media is structured, education, what passes for it, is structured. It's all about focusing on the five sense world. The education system is all about the five sense world. Mainstream science, although you've got quantum physics showing that the world cannot be solid, the rest of the mainstream scientific disciplines just crack on as if it is. And so you focus people's attention in a narrow band of possibility, which means that what is actually happening, what reality actually is dismissed as ridiculous because so many people can't perceive it's possible because of their programming up to this point. And so what you're looking at is a collective manipulation of human perception to put it in the narrowest band of sense of the possible sense of self-identity you can. That's why you want people to associate themselves and identify themselves with labels. And what's happening now as this kicks on, if you notice, is previous labels, sexual labels, racial labels, whatever, are being subdivided into smaller and smaller labels. And the smaller people self-identify, the smaller the label they self-identify with, the more they become five sense focused, and the further they move away from being inspired and influenced by an expanded state of awareness. And what I say, if you want to start this move to awaken from the program, then stop identifying with labels. Your name, your life story, your race, your religion, your sexuality, they are not who you are. They are what you are experiencing. And if we come then to this thing about shape-shifting, like I say, if the world was solid, that would be impossible, but it's not. The base form of the body, like the base form of absolutely everything in this reality, is waveform vibrating information energy. People should just think of a Wi-Fi field. If you're in a building where there's a Wi-Fi field, which is almost every one of them these days, then you look around the room. Where's the Wi-Fi field? You can't see it. But in that room, in that space you're looking at but cannot see, is an entire collective reality called the internet on a radiation information field. And you get a computer and you tune it into that field, and suddenly on the screen of the computer comes that information from the field in a completely different form on the screen. The only place the internet exists as you see it on the screen is on the screen. Everywhere else, it's Wi-Fi fields and electrical circuits and all the rest of it. And it's the same with our reality. We, through this biological computer we call the body, are interacting with this field, and we are decoding information in it into a completely different form, just like the computer and the internet, which the brain does. And this is why, if you look at the five senses, what they do is take vibrational information, the ear is a classic, and they turn it into electrical information, which is then communicated to the brain. This is sight as well. And the brain then decodes that information into digital holographic information, which is the illusory solid world we think is outside of us, but is actually within us. Just as the computer screen and the information on that screen that I'm looking at now in front of me is inside the computer. And so when you are looking at a energetic field of information that we call human, what you do is you decode that from the waveform into the electrical, into the holographic, and you see a human body. However, this manipulative force has placed within us a network of bloodlines which incessantly interbreed so that this information field can be perpetuated. Because if it bred within the human population as a whole, this particular, if you like, code would be quickly diluted. So that's why they interbreed. That's why royalty interbreed with themselves. That's why the Eastern establishment families of the United States interbreed with each other, not through love often, but through genetics. And so when you have these particular bloodlines, they are hybrids. They have an energetic field which has the human information field, and they have another energetic field which has the non-human energetic field, usually reptilian. So normally, as they operate in our society, the human field is the one that's projected. That's the one that any observer will decode and appear to see a human form. But when, and it happens often when these people are in a state of rage or emotional kind of distorted emotional state, because when you're in a state of rage or anger or fury, for instance, you can feel an electrical charge going through the body. You can feel it. And what that does is disturb the normal energetic information balance of the hybrid fields, and the non-human field can, if you like, overpower the human field. And when you and the observer then is first of all looking at the human field, and they see a human. They think it's a solid human, but it's a holographic human, because that's how it works. And then suddenly there's a shift, and they see someone apparently shift from a solid body to a solid body, but that's not what's happened. What's happened is the non-human field, information field, has become the dominant one, and they can do this with their own minds if they want to, the more advanced of them. Then, and suddenly the observer is no longer decoding the human field, it's decoding the non-human field. And to the observer's perception, that person has shifted from a human form to a non-human form. When what's actually happened is the observer is decoding a different field to the one they were decoding before, and therefore they perceive that the person has changed shape. That's not how it works, which is why I say if people are led to believe, as they are, that this world is all solid and how we experience it is how it is, then they're always going to laugh and dismiss anyone who talks about shapeshifting. But again, I look at the evidence, not people's perceptions of the evidence, because I don't go with a preconceived idea. I'm open to anything as long as the information supports it. And when you have endless stories throughout the ancient world, all the different ancient cultures talking about shapeshifting, and then you talk to people within the military industrial complex in places like America who tell you the same thing, then there's something to look at if you're interested in the truth.
Absolutely, David. Thank you for all that. It's, very deep information, and I got a lot out of it, but mainly it's educate ourselves, change our perception from little old me to universal consciousness, and then we are out of the field. And I mean, our field is expanded. Now, as it is to be expected, we have lots of questions for you from our listeners. I'll ask the first one. It comes from our dear colleague at the network, Misha Johnson. She wants to know how archons and jinns take over people, like jinns in Islam. I've studied Islam also. I mean, all world religions for the same purpose you just mentioned, because they are mentioned in all the ancient texts, and it keeps saying, do not get angry, because possessions happen when you're angry. So our first questions from Misha: how archons and jinns take over people? And our next questions would be, with so many people waking up, will we reach a tipping point that will change the consciousness of this planet, allowing us to awaken from the matrix? And that question's from Tony. And the reason why I asked both of them is because we have about 12 minutes left.
All right.
Thanks, David.
Well, that will get me through the end of the first sentence then.
I know. I'm sorry.
The thing about the archons and the jinn and etc. Is a very important one, because I started researching this, and what you realize is all these different names in the different cultures for this non-human manipulative force they're actually describing the same thing. So if you look at the archons as described by the Gnostic belief system, and the amazing texts that were found in an earthen jar at Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945, where a fifth of these writings, which were buried, it's said about 400 AD, are about the archons, and they describe the archons as manipulating human society and having created a fake reality for humans to keep us in servitude. Then you look at the jinn in the Islamic and actually pre-Islamic belief system, that's where it came from, and they're describing the same thing. Then you look at the demons of Christian belief, and they're describing the same thing, and so on and so forth it goes. So in its base form, this manipulative force is simply a distorted state of awareness, and it takes form in various ways, but its basic form, like we are in a basic form, a state of awareness. And I was staggered to read in the Nag Hammadi texts the Gnostic writers describing that this archontic consciousness takes form, and two of the main forms it takes, these writings say, are reptilian and like a grey fetus with basically big black eyes, which is obviously a very clear description of the so-called greys. And so its means of control is manipulating human perception by controlling, for instance, today, the sources of information that people receive. This archontic force is ultimately behind all this censorship that's going on through these archontic organizations like Facebook and Google and these other internet giants who are now controlling what people see and hear and censoring everybody that's challenging the narrative. But another way, coming to the question, that they control perception directly is through what people call possession. And what is possession? This is another ancient common theme through history, people being possessed. It's when this external energetic force, consciousness, attaches itself to the consciousness at the waveform level of humans. Now, for that attachment to take place, the human field has to be within the frequency band of the possessing field, so that there can be a vibrational frequency attachment through which manipulation of perception can take place. Someone's been possessed. So when you look at this archontic force in all its forms, you're looking at a very distorted, low vibrational state of awareness. I know that for a fact because it wouldn't do what it does if it wasn't in that state. So it's in a relatively dense state of vibration. So what it's trying to do, and has been doing through history, is seeking to manipulate human society to pull the vibrational state of humans, i.e. the perceptual state of humans, into its frequency band, its frequency range, because then this attachment can take place and there can be a manipulation of perception through that attachment, through that connection. So the last thing this force wants is an awakening humanity, that as it awakens, as I said earlier, and expands its awareness, its frequency increases, its vibration quickens. And the more it quickens, the more it's becoming detached from an influence by this low vibrational manipulative force. So you talk about anger. Anger can be a very good thing, so long as it's not anger with hatred, for instance. You can be angry about a situation, and then you can channel that anger into wanting to make a positive difference about that situation. And the anger has been the trigger that's motivated you, but you don't stay in the anger. You turn it into something else. Drugs, having too much alcohol, anything, depression, anxiety, all these things are fear, classic. All these things are low vibrational states because every emotion has a thought has a vibration of its own. So when people fall into fear, they fall into anxiety, they fall into depression, they fall into hopelessness. What do they say? I feel so heavy today. Well, that's because their perceptual state, thus their frequency state, through that emotional state, is vibrating so slowly that their energetic field falls into density. When you feel joy and you feel love in its true sense, not attraction love, but in its true sense, that's a very, very high frequency. And thus people say, I feel so light today, because that's the effect on their energetic field. So the whole foundation of this control of humanity is manipulating humanity to pull us into a frequency state that this force can attach to, and thus manipulate the perceptions of. So the more war you have, the more conflict you have, the more division you have, the more hunger in a world of plenty you have, the more suffering you have, the more humanity is going to fall into these low vibrational states. And that's why we're having them. That's why we're having them. That's why the networks of secret societies that I've exposed in my books, and I expose big time in this new film that's just come out, Renegade, which is available through davidicke.com. That's why these networks of secret societies and bloodlines are the ones that are behind all this division, conflict, war, and suffering on Earth, because they're the middlemen and women within our world that are representing this force, and that's why the world is as it is. And so the answer is not stockpiling weapons to fight the enemy. That's just going to pull you into a low vibrational state, which is exactly where they want. It's like in America now with Trump and the so-called progressives. That division, that mutual hatred is pulling both the Trump supporters and Trump haters down into the same vibrational state. It's divide and rule. And if people just realized it doesn't matter if Trump's in power, because he's not in power, the people around him are in power. It doesn't matter if Clinton's in power, because it's the people around her that would be in power. It doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican. It's a one-party state. It's all a hoax. It's all an illusion. It's all a diversion. The real way to change anything is to change human perception, starting with our own, thus change our frequency, thus change what can attach to us or not attach to us. Because this whole thing of possession, it's vastly greater than people think, because they might think of the old Exorcist movie, and literally when people are so possessed that their shape changes, what is happening there? The possessing entity is so infusing its vibrational information field into the possessed person that the information field of the possessed person starts to reflect the possessing entity's information field, and to the observer, the possessed person's face and starts to change. It starts to become hideous, etc. This is just a form of shape-shifting. And so if we think of our own perceptual state, self-identity, thus frequency state, we can take our power back from that which is manipulating. And you see, as I was quickly going to say, and then I'll stop. The classic Exorcist movie, possession, where the face changes, that's not the only possession. That's extreme possession. Possession can take many, many different forms, much more milder, that don't get to that level, but are still infusing people with their perceptions of reality, their perceptions of self, their perception of others, and their perception of events.
Absolutely, David. I agree with you. I think it can be mental as well. Very subtle. You're talking to someone 1 minute, and the next minute you can just feel an infusion of energy, and it's a whole another vibration talking to you. I've experienced that, and I know what you're talking about. Do you think we will reach a tipping point that will change consciousness with so many people waking up?
Well, I started a world speaking tour in 2016, which is just ended. I will start another one eventually, but of course there are forces now trying to shut down my public events and stop me speaking in public, which is kind of a confirmation that I'm on the right track. But I started that speaking tour in 2016 because I saw very clearly there was a gathering shift in the number of people who were becoming uneasy about the world. They didn't really know what was going on, but they didn't like it. And the number of people who were willing to maybe give other explanations of the world and reality a chance where they dismissed them before. And as I traveled literally around the world, it was.
I apologize, David. I apologize. We're at the show end. I hope to have you back. I apologize about this. I want to thank you, David, for being here and joining me. And be sure to check out davidicke.com. That's where you can find the movie Renegade, which I'm about to watch right after the show. And tune in next week as my special guest is Crystal Dawn in her movie The Illumined Ones. Until then, everyone, stay safe, stay strong, and remember, this is our reality. Until next week, bye, everyone.
You've been listening to Our Reality, hosted by Violeta Frankovic. Live every Saturday from the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on the host as well as the show, as well as upcoming guests, please check out our reality show page at kcorradio.com.
Our reality.
From the ordinary to the extraordinary, we've got you covered. Our reality, changing the world, one topic at a time. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.